So hello everyone, thanks for joining this online presentation. As the slide suggests, today we are going to talk about the community over code principle, and in particular, how this principle can help you to build successful open source projects. A bit about myself. So as it was said, right now, I'm working at DevRel. I'm running DevRel at GreekGain. And also I spend most of my time working with Apache Software communities and with Apache Ignite community in particular. Before that, before running this DevRel team, I was wearing many hats. I was working in engineering, I was running product management, I spent some of my time even in sales and technical support, but still my roots belong to the technology evangelism and developer relations, because my professional career started at Sun Microsystems, where I was working with a technology evangelism group. I was building local Sun communities where I helped application developers to adopt technologies such as Java, NetBeans, and Solaris. And after Sun was acquired by Oracle, a little bit later, I joined Oracle Java engineering team. I was developing Java libraries and frameworks, and still during my spare time, I was building nice demos. I was giving talks on Java technologies, trying to explain the Java community members how to use this technology better. So what we are going to learn throughout the next 18 minutes. First thing first, we have to start with the community over code principle. In fact, that's the North Star or the motto of the Apache Software Foundation. So we'll spend like 2 or 3 minutes. I will introduce you to the Apache Software Foundation, but hopefully most of you are aware of these open source communities. And then we will take and break down this community over code principle by taking Apache Ignite as one of the projects of the foundation, and we will discover how this community over code principle helped Ignite to kind of grow from a small open source project to a lively and healthy community. All right, community over code, or as always, sometimes we say community is bigger than code. What it means? If you Google for this term, you might end up being on many website pages of the Apache Software Foundation. I would say that there is no any precise definition, but this one I like the most. Most successful, long-lived projects value a broad and collaborative community over the details of the code itself. What does it mean? Let's take a simple example. You started your startup company, and you want to build like that open source project, and you want to build a community around this project. So you hired a couple of talented and smart engineers, and basically you open sourced your technology, you are building the technology together, but then suddenly you see that your community does not grow. Yes, your smart people can write code quickly, they can do a lot of releases, but the community does not excel. And then you find out that your engineers whom you hired are not collaborative. They don't want, to collaborate. They don't want to help others to grow. They don't want to see anybody else in this community. And then you have a trade-off. Probably you would kind of educate them, you would change their minds, or you can let them go. Or if the code is of the biggest value for you, then you can leave these guys, but then forget about the community. You might still have a good open source project, but that will not be the project that is driven by a broader community. And the idea of the code or community of the code principle is that even if you have smart and talented engineers in your company, but if those engineers are not ready to collaborate and become a part of a broader community, then it's better not to kind of work with such engineers, or just better not to build a community with such people. So, and this community over code principle is used by more than 340 top-level projects of the Apache Software Foundation. So right now we have more than 7,700 committers who drive and build these projects. And also at this Apache Software Foundation, we decided to do a simple calculation. We estimated that the total code value of all these open source projects exceeds $20 billion. So if to give you an example, most likely every software company uses Apache Software Foundation technologies. From the space station to big banks to retail companies, let's do a simple exercise. Go and talk to your application developers of your companies and check if they use any Apache software technology. Most likely they will. And Apache Ignite is one of the examples one of the projects of the foundation. And we will take this project to break down the code over principle in a bit more details. So I belong to this community. I spend a lot of my time working with this community. I'm a committer and project management committee member. And this project basically is a distributed in-memory database that can keep your data across a cluster of machines, and then you can process it really quick. This project was donated by GridGain, the company I'm working for, in 2015. And right now we have more than 300,000 downloads per month. And the project is among the top 5 projects of the foundation, ranked by the user list and dev list activity. All right, so now let's see. That was year 2015. And we at GridGain decided to donate Ignite to the open source community. And our first stage was so-called newborn stage. And the goal of this stage is to build that core community. Luckily, at the Apache Software Foundation, we have an Apache incubator. That's the special place where every open source project arrives if it wants to become a top-level project of the foundation. So you will not be able, just to go ahead and claim that you became a top-level project of the foundation unless you graduate from this incubator. And if you want to graduate, your primary graduation criteria will not be related to any code. Nobody will be taking care of your code. If you are already in the incubator, most likely the foundation discovered that there is a real value in your project, and it makes sense to make your project a resident of the foundation. And your primary exit criteria would be, is your community ready to become a top-level project? And to become ready for the graduation, you have to focus on several tasks. First of all, diversity. What it means. When we were donating Ignite to the foundation, for the very first weeks or even month, all the contributors were affiliated with GridGain, and that's not good. If you want to graduate, you have to have applicant contributors from other companies. They might be independent, or they should not be affiliated with GridGain. That's the very first requirement. That's what we call community. Second, longevity. There has to be a core group of the contributors who can continue maintaining and driving your project, even if a big fraction of people leaves your project. It can happen. Sometimes contributors come, contributors go, but you have to have the core group that can drive your project forward, that can fix security issues, and that can produce releases. Self-governance, what it means. In particular, in the Apache Software Foundation, I do believe that in other foundations, we don't have any roles or titles for managers. There are no any project managers or product managers. Nobody is coming to the contributors and saying, guys, that's our roadmap. Now, please take your tasks and go ahead, develop. Let's work on the next version of the release. It doesn't work this way in open source. Your code contributors have to learn how to govern the project without any management titles. So the same code contributors who are committing APIs or changes, they will be producing releases. They will be together deciding on what would be the next roadmap, what would be the next features of your project. So no any management, no any kind of governance in that classical enterprise way. And finally, probably the most important one is open collaboration. When we work for enterprise companies, even like at GridGain, it's absolutely perfect, to go on a phone call, or just to chat in Slack with someone and quickly make a decision about some improvement. But that's not the way how things work in open source. If, let's say, you want your engineers who belong to this community want to do some significant change in the project, then yes, they can discuss everything in the kitchen, but then before doing any changes, they have to start a discussion, email discussion on mailing lists, so that the other community members can get involved in this discussion. So why does it matter? Several things. First of all the contributors can live across different continents, different time zones. Not everybody can speak English fluently. That's why all the major decisions are not taken on phone calls. And also sometimes people need to, a lot of contributors are volunteers. They cannot check your email today and respond instantaneously. Sometimes they need to take more time for that. That's why mailing lists are the primary communication channel on the community, because you want to get as many people as possible to be involved. So what it means for your company when you're entering this newborn stage. And here is we're talking about your company that decided to donate a project to a foundation like Apache. So first of all, you're going to undertake changes in your engineering organization. It's inevitable. But also the biggest and most profound change is the cultural shift in your company. Let me explain this in more details. When it comes to the changes in the engineering team, there will be some functional changes, like you have to use the tool set of the Apache Software Foundation, or you have to follow some release practices, etc. But the biggest changes are public communication. That's what I've already mentioned. Yes, your engineers are encouraged still to communicate daily with each other if they work for the same company. But if there is any significant change that has to be done with this open source project, that has to be discussed on mailing lists so that the rest of the community can be involved. And also you, as let's say management of the company, have to encourage and also allocate time for your engineers to mentor other external contributors. External contributors will be sending pull requests. They will be asking questions, and that takes time to review everything. And if you're not prioritizing this for your engineering organization, guess what? Your community, development community, is not going to grow because nobody supports your external contributors. As for the company-wide cultural shift, remember that the one thing that you need to remember really quick is that once you donate the project to the foundation, that's no longer your IP. It no longer belongs to you. That's why fight the temptation to manage the community and the project evolution. If you're a project manager, or CTO, don't come to the community and tell even your engineers inner kind of what to do, what needs to be done. Don't try to enforce any roadmaps. Don't try to enforce any release life cycles. Yes, you can join the discussion. You can propose changes. You can propose roadmaps, but you are not allowed to manage. You have to earn your merit. And when we are saying about the merit at the Apache Software Foundation, you have to contribute. As long as you contribute to the community, to the success of your project, then your voice will matter over the time, and other contributors will be listening to you. But titles don't work in the community. All right, so what we learned during this stage. First of all, the cultural shift takes more time. Ignite graduated successfully from the incubator, but still it took us a longer time to fight the old habits, like related to the old management practices and so on and so forth. But remember this, we took community at the first priority, and that helped us gradually to become stronger and bigger. And finally, we arrived in the toddler stage. So how do I define this stage? So here is, you already have your project became popular, and you are getting a lot of the users who come download your project and start using for their applications. All right. And the problem here is that the number of users will dwarf the number of your community members. And those users, they want to use your project. So they will be asking for details like how to install it, how to optimize it, how to troubleshoot it. They will be hitting some unique problems, and they will be sending questions to their community. And guess what? Your small group of code contributors will not be able to handle everything, right? They came to the community for fun. They want to develop your cool technology. They are developers. But users are coming and asking for a professionally written documentation. They are asking for detailed responses on their questions. And your developers are not able to handle everything. And what happens if your community treats code as the biggest priority over the community? Then what happens with many projects is that you end up having poor documentation because developers don't want to write it, or developers are reluctant to respond on the user list. That's why if you want to truly focus on the community over code principle, again, what can you do with your community? You have two problems. The first one is your documentation. And documentation, ideally, even for open source projects, have to be treated as your level #1 technical support. If people Google for any question, they ideally should derive on the technical documentation. If they cannot find any details on the technical documentation, then they can send the question to your mailing lists, and they have to find a well-written response. So what did we do with Apache Ignite? Because we really hit this problem really hard. So we focused on the community, and we decided to expand and diversify our community. We brought in professional technical writers to Ignite. Also, those technical writers started writing and became responsible for the technical documentation. In parallel, we kept educating the rest of the community on the value of the documentation. We showed Google Analytic metrics. We confirmed that a number of dummy questions reduced to the user list, etc. And guess what? Over the time, development community saw the value, and several developers, they came, raised their head saying that, guys, I want to kind of create this documentation page because someone asked for it. Please, could you review it? And that also helps to build better bonds between your code contributors and technical writers. That's exceptional. But here is, don't forget about one thing. You have to treat and recognize technical writers as you would treat and recognize your code contributors. At Apache Software Foundation, it's simple. Our technical writers, they also can climb up this growth ladder. First, you're a contributor, then you can become a committer, then you can become a member of project management committee. In Ignite, we have a technical writer who is already a committer. And the same recipe I would suggest to use for your user support. Most likely, if you are the company that donated this project, you have enterprise support. So negotiate and allocate part of your customer support team time for support of your open source users. It's really easy. And also, once you start in doing that, your open source users will see that this project is truly unique. You're writing nice code, the project is valuable, your documentation is professionally written, and also they find professional responses on the user lists. And it all works. And then some of the code developers, they also will join those user list discussions because they also want to be helpful. They will follow those professional customer support team guys. It doesn't mean that you have to do this all the times. As soon as your project grows and becomes, let's say, as big as Java, Kubernetes, or let's say Docker, most likely you no longer need to invest the time of your customer support team in the support of your users, because your community user base became so big enough that the old users can support the newcomers. But anyway, in Ignite, we still have to do this because Ignite is not as big as, let's say, Kafka or Java. And also recognize everybody who spends time working with your users. For instance, when it comes to code contribution and technical documentation contribution, it's all easy. You can become a committer, you can become a project management committee. When it comes to the presentations, support, etc., we at GridGain internally have leaderboards where we value every contribution. Let it be a blog post, let it be support of their users on the user list, etc., etc. Okay. So what's the primary outcome of this stage? Professionals should write documentation and work with the users, especially at this stage, while your project is getting momentum and getting the very first users. And the final stage, 10 years. So your project already stands solid on the ground. And here is what might happen. Another big enterprise company might become interested in your project, like IBM, Google, Salesforce. They want to come and contribute to it because and that can lead to community split if you're not working on this. So what are the distinct problems of this stage? All the enterprise companies, however you say it, they have their business goals in mind. They're not just contributing to the open source for free. Also, many enterprise companies, new enterprise companies, they will bring in a lot of engineers, and those engineers have to be educated on your community principles, on your values. And what's the most probably threatening for your company that was with the community since the inception is that another vendor can start contributing features that you're already selling in your enterprise offerings. And here is, again, stick to this community over code principle, but also you can expand it, saying that community is bigger than code plus business. What it means? For your company, which is with the community since the inception. You have to celebrate this event when a big another enterprise vendor comes to the community and decides to invest by bringing in new engineers, because that's the growth. That's a significant growth of your project. It means that you achieved some significant milestone. It's not a big deal that some of your enterprise features might appear in the open source. Just move on, evolve your business models, create new features. You have to move on together with your community. And when it comes to how can you avoid fractions, we just go ahead and talk to other vendors. It's just, a universe recipe. If, let's say, you see that there are some conflict of interest, find like-minded people on the other side of the bridge. Go and talk to the people who work for that new vendor company. Align on your plans, align on your resources, do and drive this project together. So we actually at this stage right now in Ignite, and there are two major vendors who are contributing to Ignite, and we are trying to build these bridges. Sometimes it works, but still we keep running this conversation, and it works really well because Ignite is growing more rapidly because many more companies are building it. All right, summary. Wrapping up, community over code. If you truly want, if your goal is just to build an open source project, probably you don't need to have any community. You just can hire some talented and smart people who can release your project quickly. But if the community matters to you, then community goals and needs has to prevail. Build a healthy community, and it will pay off in the long term. And don't worry about the code. Code will not suffer. Your talented and involved people will figure out how to build a high-quality software. Yes, it might take more time because they have to come to a consensus over the mailing list. You cannot release new product versions frequently, but it's all worthwhile, right? So thanks a lot.